Good morning, folks. Vijay Kumar, Associate Dean of Digital Learning over here. And I think the appropriate term, I'm breathlessly delighted because I just ran up to here to make it on time. Breathlessly delighted to welcome you to MIT, on behalf of MIT, on behalf of the Office of Digital Learning, and all these folks led by Aneen who have worked very hard to bring all of us together over here for this LINC conference. The conference is cast in a time of great change, great expectations around the opportunities that digital technologies and digital learning provide for increasing access and quality. It's also a time where we struggle to see how do we preserve what we value in terms of quality education while trying to take advantage of the affordances of new technology. I'm really excited to see many of you old friends who have been here, coming to LINC since its inception, and a lot of new faces also, which also cheers you up because regeneration is a very important part of this whole community experience. Our fearless leader, and I did spot him because he was making sure that Sanjay Sharma, there, keeps talking about the fact that it's not business as usual, and I think all of us are gathered here to figure out how it needs to be different, how it can be different, again, in light of all that is going on. So I'm really delighted to have you all over here. I'm going to be talking more about the conference and, in a few minutes to give you some frame for what's going to happen in the next couple of days. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the conference spans almost every continent that exists and some that aren't in existence yet, so which I'm sure will happen, which is really wonderful because this is a community that has grown, that's been formed. And one of the things that I'm going to say right at the outset is I mean, this is an E-conference. E for energizing, educational, exciting, all that stuff. But I've noticed always that it's all of us over here that come over here year after year, or meet in Jordan or wherever, that make it so. And I'm pretty confident that that's going to be the scene in the next, for the next 2 days. And what I'd like to do is to launch this off in a proper manner. Going to ask Professor Dick Larson over here, who many of you know, founded LINC several years ago. Dick has done a lot of stuff over here, including, and some might not like this very much, being instrumental in getting me here to MIT. But he has championed a lot of our technology-enabled efforts over here at MIT. Building 9, where for many years my office used to exist, was remodeled to respond to the opportunities that digital learning, those days, educational technology, I guess was the term then, provided. Dick Larson, and most of you know who Dick is. Dick, just before you introduce him, why don't you come on over here, Dick? And Dick's been at MIT forever. Some claim he was born here, right? But he has been here when, many of the dorms were not over here. Maybe there was only one. He received his BS and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from MIT, where he's a Mitsui professor in MIT's Institute for Data Systems and Society. He's a prolific author, authoring over 100 scientific articles. He is an OR guy, so a lot of his writing has been in the field of operations research, which is one of the reasons why I think he sort of voted for me over here. He has served as president of ORSA, which is the Operations Research Society of America, and is past president of INFORMS, the Institute for Operations Research and Management, and it goes on. What is particularly relevant in the context of this conversation is that in this conference over here, that he is the founding director of LINC, the Learning International Networks Consortium, which we in digital learning are very happy to have taken on to become, to be the host for. He's a principal investigator, and many of you know Dick through his other presence through Blossoms, the program that, the open source program that uses blended learning in a very open way for science and mathematics education, which produces a lot of video vignettes, most of them locally produced in other countries. And it's an international collaboration with 10 countries, and this is targeted towards high school education in STEM areas. So Dick has, through spirit, through his actual engagement, and a lot of active engagement, guided educational technology efforts over here and created this wonderful opportunity for all of us as a community to get together to see how we can make a difference to our environments and to environments that we touch. Dick?
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's a real pleasure to see you all here today. Welcome to LINC 7, or LINC 2016, whichever you prefer. It's with mixed emotions that I'm here today, in the sense that we're delighted to pass LINC on to MIT Central, which is the Office of Digital Learning, and I hope to still be involved, but no longer as head of it. We see lots of familiar faces here from before, contributing to LINC since its beginning. And we see lots of new faces, and we look forward to getting to know you better over the next three days. Okay, so there we go. There's the old LINC. See, there's the old LINC logo, and now we have a new and improved LINC logo, starting this year. Okay, well, what got us going with LINC in the first place? Basically, in Building 9, which Vijay just referred to, in the mid to late 90s, lots of people from particularly developing countries came to us and said, how can we interact with MIT in the sense of education, distance learning, education? And that was before OpenCourseWare, that was before open educational resources. And so we thought about this a lot, and we say, basically, we're at a transformative moment in the history of mankind. And that is, if we dream and if we work toward it, we can say that with today's computer and telecommunications technologies, every young person can have a quality education regardless of his or her place of birth or wealth of parents. And I have to say, you're going to hear over the next 3 days lots of examples about this is becoming a reality. We have students here at MIT, undergraduates, who have come from countries that have marginal internet connectivity, but enough, and who have taken MOOCs and aced them and become undergraduate at MIT, where without this, that never would have happened. So there are some students we saw in one of the poorest provinces in China, Ningxia province. Elizabeth Burry and I did some research both in China and Mexico in 2004. In an unheated classroom, you see they're wearing parkas. Computers of that time, of 2004, fixated on learning some aspect of biology. And so the dream was alive then, and it's even more alive now. So our first LINC workshop was in 2003 here at MIT. We had 80 participants, 15 countries. The late Bill Mitchell was one of the co-founders of LINC, was one of the speakers. Dr. Naveed Malik, who's here today. Naveed, say hello. And he's been very supportive of LINC ever since day number one. I view him as a co-founder of LINC. And Glenn Straley, who's here today, the most successful treasurer in the history of MIT. And the 3 years after his retirement, he volunteered to work with us in Building 9 and did lots of stuff, and I view him also. Glenn, thank you so much for your continual support and encouragement even through this day. So in the beginnings, I served as director of CAS, and LINC benefited from the late Bill Mitchell, Glenn Straley, Phil Khoury, Vijay, who's your MC this year. Thank you, Vijay. Elizabeth Murray. Elizabeth Murray is right here. I view her as a co-founder of LINC too, and she has probably spent more hours on LINC than any other human being on planet Earth. For instance, she put together all of the proceedings. Let's stand up. Without her, these proceedings wouldn't exist. We have all 6, and then you can download them as PDFs on the web page, and we have old-fashioned paper copies as well. And we have other people from MIT, all of whom were involved. And now Cease of OCW has replaced Anne Margulies, and OCW has always been very supportive of LINC as well. So we've also benefited from the strong support of former President, the late Charles M. Best, and also Her Majesty Queen Rania of Jordan. And internationally, again, I'd like to thank Naveed Malik, who's here, Dr. Saeed Jahama, who's sitting right next to him. And without him, LINC 2007 in Jordan would not have occurred, would not have happened. Please stand up and take a round of applause. Sean Rowland, who's not here, president of Hibernia College, Patricio, now retired president of Technology Monterey, Dr. Bakri Diallo, his speaking is here. He here this morning yet? Okay, he'll be here later today. Dr. Malad Sabali. So we have lots of friends and colleagues, and basically everyone from that time on is a kind of a co-founder of LINC. And you've created, I think, a very important asset for us going forward to learn best practices from each other. MIT, over the years, over the past 12 or 13 years that LINC has happened, has now committed from the president's office on down to have as a legacy thing for President Reif, education as both research and production from K-12 through undergraduate, graduate, and lifelong learning. It's a very, very exciting time. Okay, the LINC 2004 conference, we had those 117, 4 countries. And we had a special presentation from Dr. Fouad El-Harazin from Gaza, president of the Gaza International Foundation for Peace on Earth. And he had a lot of themes, but one of the themes is that teenagers today, particularly, let's say, in the Middle East at the time, but other countries as well, might get stereotypes of adults and students in other countries through their parents, through news media, and these stereotypes might be not correct, and they might not be conducive to worldwide peace. And he said that, he postulated that e-learning could be an ameliorative kind of correction here. And that is, if you have folks, particularly, let's say, secondary school, high school kids, where they're very formative years and making their opinions about the world, if they could learn from each other and from different countries that probably they can't travel to, they never could travel to, and learn physics and learn biology and learn mathematics from people that don't look like them and speak a different language, a translation, that would be great. And so we all got very excited. So I invited that night everyone from the Middle East who was there, and there was a lot of them, out to dinner and on me. And we got very excited. And so guess what? They signed a blank check. There it is. They signed a blank check and it said, Dick, you and your LINC team work together to try to find out how to get teenagers through high school to learn from each other, learn from people in different countries, different languages, different cultures. And we trust you, so there's no SOW here. There's no statement of work. We trust whatever statement of work you have. So that was the impetus for now, which is now Blossoms, which will be discussed in tomorrow afternoon's workshop. That's a 90-minute workshop. So you can see, and some of the signatures up there you may recognize are people here, and some of the signatures, unfortunately, are people who are not here at the current time. LINC 2005, 80 participants, 20 countries, and that's the group. We hope to be able to take a group photograph here today. Anine, I think that's scheduled for, is it noontime or something like this, or whenever the group photograph is? You'll announce it, right? Yes. Okay. And 2007, this was the largest LINC conference. We had over 600 participants, bilocated in Jordan and Dubai, okay? And over 25 countries. And there are some photographs. There's Her Majesty Queen Rania, who gave a speech and who was the patron. Phil Clay, the Chancellor of MIT, was there, gave 2 speeches. On Queen Rania's right are her Minister of Education, Minister of Higher Education. And then there's a guy in a crazy yellow tie. I have no idea who that is. I never recognized that person. We had a lot of fun. The mayor of Amman gave us a great dinner on top of one of the famous 7 hills in Amman. And I know that Saeed danced the night away. We have photographs to prove this. We also had fun in Petra, and so you can see we enjoyed the culture of Jordan as well. And we went to Dubai, and we had the Minister of Education involved. Dr. Naveed Malik gave a very nice presentation, and we had a great sumptuous dinner. And so that was a very memorable time. Then back at MIT in 2010, over 100 papers, 40 countries. Charles Vest was who was then the president of the U.S. National Academy of Engineers, president emeritus of MIT, gave a wonderful speech, keynote speech. And these speeches are videotaped and are on our website. And most recently, we have fun. We go out on the boat. Some of you are going out on the boat tomorrow night. And that, hopefully the weather will be good. And so that was LINC 2013. And we had it here in this room, 10250, which is an iconic classroom at MIT. And there we basically introduced to LINC MOOCs. And we had some people you recognize there, including Professor Sanjay Sarma, who's sitting up there waving his hand. And the future of virtual universities with people like Patricio Lopez from Monterey Tech, Bakri Diallo, who will be speaking tomorrow, Naveed Malik again. So you see a recurrence of some of these people who come to all the LINC conferences, but we welcome those of you for whom it's the first conference. We hope it's not your last one. We hope you come going forward. And I hope to be able to participate in the ones in the future as well. So what is the business for today? The business for today is that. I'm passing the baton from kind of like founding director of LINC and kind of managing with a great team of volunteers, and I've signaled many of them by name here, and some others are not here. So now it goes off to MIT and Office of Digital Learning, and we're thrilled with that. And we're very proud of what we've produced so far, what LINC has become. I think for some of you, you say it's the most important conference that you go to, even though it's only every 2 or 3 years. And we really appreciate that feedback. And we want more feedback to show how we could even do it better in the future. So here's the great news. The baton passing LINC is now operated by, as I said, Office of Digital Learning, directed by Professor Sanjay Sarma, Office of the Provost, Vice President for Open Learning. He reports directly to the president of MIT. And my understanding, and Sanjay, correct me if I'm wrong, MIT has agreed that LINC is now a permanent commitment of the Institute to be offered every 2 years, the plan being that, the hope being that every other offering will be in a partnering country. So, if you're visiting from some other country, and most of you are, perhaps LINC 2018 will be hosted near you. And if you're interested in that, we should discuss such possibilities. And we want to thank also the LINC 2016 Coordinating Planning Committee. There were about 16 or 17 people on it, but the head of the whole thing, and this never would have happened today if Aneen Ward hadn't been so great as the project manager for LINC. Aneen, please stand up and take a bow. So, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. We really appreciate your support for LINC and for what it means. And let's not forget what it means, too, is there anything in life that's more important to invest in than education of our young people? You think about it. You say, well, maybe healthcare. But research has shown that people's life choices, which affect their health directly, are a function of their educational level. So education, in so many ways, is the best way we can invest in the future. And I think those of you who are here believe that. So thank you very much. It's on with the show, but I have one thing, Professor Sarma. Now, should I come up to you? I want to shake your hand. Or you're going to come down here? Are you going to come down here? Okay. I have a present for Professor Sarma. If you please come over this way. I have a present for you. This is passing the baton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Dick. Thank you for this wonderful legacy. And we just want to let you know that baton passing regardless, or as they say in Boston, irregardless of the baton passing, you can run, but you can't hide. So we'll know where to find you. Folks, one of the things, I started off by saying that this particular conference is cast in the context of great change and great expectations. And you've heard some of the expectations being referred to, expectations around education for all, expanded access to quality education, expectations that we see a lot around more relevance in education, meaning education that is more acutely and more conspicuously tied to whether it's economic opportunity, employment opportunities. There's all kinds of expectations around much more agility in education, most recently surfaced by displaced populations, like either through socio-political situations like in Syria, or who knows, later on through situations, geographical situations, global warming. So how does education, there are expectations around how can education respond to populations that are displaced and respond with agility and responsibly. So there's that, and all those those expectations are demand expectations. On the supply side, we also see an emerging ecosystem, where there's an abundance of content, digitally enabled opportunities, and more recently, something that we are paying a lot of attention to at MIT, which is the influence of the new science of learning, and how do domains like brain science impact how we think about learning. And so there are lots of new influences, and it is in this context that the group that got together to construct the program for this conference operated. And so some of the themes, you all have seen the program, the agenda, I hope. But if you look at the themes that this conference has, the themes reflect both this context of demand and the context of supply, the opportunity. So the themes are around providing quality education at scale, bridging the education divide, understanding learning engineering and incorporating key fundamentals, developing tools for the digital learning experience, recognizing the role of digital learning for students of all ages. These themes reflect, and the sessions, the panel discussions, the discussions that you'll have both in the panel and hopefully a lot of them in the hallways, reflect these themes, which are, again, reflections of the context that we are operating in. I would encourage you to, we expect this group always to do, to engage very, very actively in all the panel discussions. I do want to point out that from all the papers that were submitted to the conference, there are about 40 papers that have been selected, and I'd urge you to attend the paper presentations and become part of that. A lot of effort has gone into developing those papers, and we went through, and the papers went through some degree of scrutiny before they were made available for presentations over here. So I'd really encourage you to attend those sessions also. I don't want to belabor this, but the conference is yours, the gathering is yours, so please make it as productive as we think it needs to be. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynoter for the morning, who has become a very good friend of MIT, Arthur Levine, sitting right here. Arthur is sixth president of the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, and before his appointment at Woodrow Wilson, he was president and professor of education at Teachers College, Columbia University. He also previously served as chair of the Higher Education Program, chair of the Institute for Educational Management, and senior lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Dr. Levine is the author of dozens of articles and reviews. He is not known to be shy of expressing his opinion, as I'm sure we'll find out more And rumor has it, his articles and reviews include a series of reports for the Education Schools Project on the preparation of school leaders, teachers, and education researchers. His numerous commentaries appear in such publications as the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Education Week, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and frequently nowadays on the National Public Radio also. His most recent book is Generation on a Tightrope, a portrait of today's college students that he has done with Diane Dean in 2012. Amongst his other volumes are Unequal Fortunes, Snapshots from the South Bronx, When Hope and Fear Collide, a portrait of today's college student with Jeanette Curtin, Beating the Odds, How the Poor Get to College with Jana Nitfer, Higher Learning in America. So he's published a lot on topics that are quite germane to this conference, to the aspirations of this conference. He has received numerous awards, including Carnegie and the Rockefeller Fellowship, as well as the American Council on Education's Book of the Year Award for Reform of Undergraduate Education, the Educational Press Association's Annual Award for Writing 3 times, and 25 honorary degrees. He's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and currently sits on the board of ETS, the Educational Testing Service, and Say Yes to Education, which is what we want to do. Dr. Levine was also previous president of Bradford College and senior fellow at the Carnegie Foundation and Carnegie Council for Policy Studies in Higher Education. He received his bachelor's degree from Brandeis University and his PhD from SUNY Buffalo, the State University of New York at Buffalo. Arthur, Dr. Levine, please.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. And don't be envious.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. That's pretty good for this hour. Thank you for those kind comments. It's a real honor for me to be here today for a variety of reasons. One reason is this is an extraordinary group. It's a group that's in positions that are going to allow it to change the world, build what we need for tomorrow. And it's rare to see these kinds of people in one room. Second, I really admire MIT. I think more than any university in the United States, MIT is leading higher education into the 21st century, moving higher education from an industrial model to the model we're going to need for information economies. I'm a big fan of its leaders, whether it's Raphael Reif, the president, or Sanjay Sarma, or Vijay Kumar. And what I should say is this. It's sort of a warning. When I was still at Teachers College, I used to teach a course every other year. And my final teaching of that course, I received my course evaluations from my students. And I had one evaluation that said, if I had 20 minutes left to live, I would want to spend them in Arthur Levine's class. Because every minute with Arthur Levine feels like an hour. By those standards, we've got about a day together. Now, I'm only going to talk for a short time. I want to leave time for questions and answers. But I promise, even though I'm only talking for a short time, it'll seem much longer. What I want to talk to you about today is reinventing teacher education. And that's a joint project that the Woodrow Wilson Foundation is doing with MIT. But the real question is, how do you change? How do you produce change at scale? Woodrow Wilson is a foundation. It was started after World War II. And what really started it was there weren't enough professors to educate all the veterans coming back from the war. So what Woodrow Wilson did was give out fellowships to people who never, ever, ever would have considered becoming professors, to get them to take doctorates and join the academy. And I guess I can boast about this because I had nothing to do with it. It all happened before I arrived. Of the people they chose, 14 won Nobel Prizes, 35 won MacArthur Awards, they won Fields Medals, they won all kinds of book awards. And my parents would have been so proud had I won any of those things. In any case, many countries in this world are making a transition from national, analog, industrial economies to global, digital, information economies. One of the difficulties we face is that all of our social institutions were created for the former. Our schools, our media, government, healthcare, finance. And we look at them often and say, they don't seem to work as well as they once did. They seem to be broken. And what really needs to happen is they need to be refitted for a new world. And we can do that in two ways. We can do that by repairing the existing organizations, or we can do that by reinventing those organizations. There are some interesting differences in this regard. One is age. Older people tend to remember times in which those institutions functioned very, very well. Younger people don't. The consequence is younger people favor reinvention or replacement. Older people favor repair. Another difference is not-for-profit organizations tend to change by repair. For-profits change by replacement. And in the United States, you can see that in terms of media. The Huffington Post, which is an online journalism service, is now valued at more than the Washington Post and the Boston Globe, two of the national newspapers combined. What's also true is that highly developed nations tend to change more by repair. Lesser developed nations tend to change by replacement. And we'll see a number leapfrog developed countries by not having to worry about an infrastructure that's already in place and being able to create a new tomorrow. So let me tell you about what we're doing. Woodrow Wilson has chosen to work in both camps. We're doing 2 repair projects. We're focusing on whole states. The United States is divided into 50 states. And we're focusing on whole units. And what we're trying to do is recruit excellent people to go become science, technology, engineering, and math teachers in the highest need districts in this country. And we're also trying to improve the preparation of principals and superintendents and school heads. But that's not the project I want to tell you about today. So I should say this before describing the program I want to tell you about. Both repair and replacement are required today. We need to repair the existing organizations if they're going to be more effective, because it's going to take a period of time before we can reinvent those organizations and bring them to scale. So we need to make what we have better while we think about what reinvention would look like. What we have today is a system of education that was created for an industrial society. It relies most upon one of the most successful technologies of the industrial era, the assembly line. And what happens is time is fixed, process is fixed, The only variable is outcomes. It makes the assumption that all students can learn the same things in the same period of time. In this country, students attend school for 12 years, 180 days a year, 5 days a week, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., for lengths of time in their classes dictated by the Carnegie Foundation in 1906. Our colleges are similar. It's 4 years, 2 semesters per year, 15 weeks per semester. People take 3 courses per week, meeting 50 minutes a session. The currency in our current school system is time. It's credit hours. It's the amount of time students are exposed to a teacher, the amount of time they're taught at. In contrast, in information economies, we're going to shift. And we're going to shift to is outcomes, what students have learned, what they know, and what they can do. Time will be a variable. Process will be a variable. Only the outcomes will be fixed. The joint project with MIT and Woodrow Wilson is something we're calling the Woodrow Wilson Academy for Teaching and Learning. MIT is the incubator for this project, and the Academy is a lab for MIT. Ultimately, the Academy will offer 2 programs, one to prepare teachers, one to prepare school leaders. The programs are competency-based. And what I mean by that is they focus on the skills and knowledge a teacher needs, must have, to succeed in the classroom. The other thing competency-based education offers us is extraordinary opportunities to reach enormously large numbers of teachers who are already in classrooms through professional development. Essentially, all professional development seeks to do is build competencies where none exist now. The program that we offer with MIT will be time variable. Students will complete the program, they'll obtain their teacher certification once they've mastered all the competencies. There are no credit hours, there are no required courses, there's no seat time that students have to perform. What that means is somebody like Vijay can finish the program weeks, months. Somebody like me, this could take a lot of years. The curriculum is time variable and it's blended. It has to be blended. It's required if you're going to individualize and you're going to personalize. The program has to be a digital program to meet the needs of each student who's attending that program. The curriculum is organized around problems, real classroom problems. We call them challenges. So imagine, here's a challenge. You just gave a test. Almost all your students failed it. What are you going to do? This challenge weaves together a number of competencies: assessment, understanding students, and the students who are in your classroom, instructional effectiveness. Students are assessed before they begin the challenge. In the assessment, perhaps they have met all those competencies. Maybe they've met some, maybe they've met none. The program they pursue is based upon that assessment. Assessment continues throughout the program. And what it involves is, so as you go through this program and you work on those competencies, we've created and are creating is a virtual school. Students will work in that virtual school, they'll learn in that virtual school, they'll practice in that virtual school. They'll have interactive classrooms in that virtual school where they'll actually teach virtual students. What they'll also have is games, simulations, traditional academic materials, and clinical experience. Completion of the challenge requires demonstrating the full array of competencies associated with it. And that may be a paper and pencil test if the competencies deal with content. It may be a plan. It may be a performance. Working with MIT on this project has been a dream come true for this reason. The only way I can describe it is MIT is sort of like being in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. They're an extraordinary array of people who do an extraordinary number of things. And what we found is the way in which you get them interested in working on this project is if you can demonstrate the problem they're going to be working on is huge and hairy and hard to solve. And in those cases, what we've had is we're working with faculty, postdocs, undergrads. One of the most interesting things to us when we started this, when we tried to figure out does it make sense for MIT and Woodrow Wilson to work together, was the question of, is anybody at MIT involved in learning, teaching, cognitive? And what we found was, when they looked around the institute, they found 125 different projects in those areas, all of which now report to the Office of Digital Learning. What we've done is we formed partnerships with school districts. So what's the theory of change? How do you bring this thing to scale? Okay, we're creating this little teacher education program. How do you make that happen across large numbers of institutions? And our model's this. We're offering the academy as a resource center, not a competitor with existing teacher education programs. Teacher education programs across this country and in many other places are talking about competency-based education. They're talking about digital learning. They're talking about blended learning. They're talking about simulations and games, alternatives to credits, and course numbers for graduation. It's very hard to do that at established universities. It's very hard to get faculty to agree to change frequently, though I'm sure that's not true in any of your countries. What we're offering is a chance to see how it works. We're trying every one of those ideas. And what will happen is we will offer whatever it is we create open source. Anybody can take anything they want. The other thing we're going to do with these activities is we're going to see what works. We're going to engage in intentional experiments. Imagine bringing 3 different populations to the program. One might be older adults. One might be young people. We have a program called Teach for America, in which people come directly out of college and go teach. They have very little instruction. Could be like that, and it could be traditional students. What can we say about how long they take to graduate? What can we say about whether they graduate? What can we say about student achievement in their classes once they graduate? What can we say about whether they stay in the profession? Our goal is not so much to get the findings into journals. Our goal is to get the findings into the hands of policymakers, into the hands of legislators, into the hands of governors in this country, into the hands of heads of higher ed systems, into the hands of heads of school systems. And we're hoping is to create a policy environment that'll support change of the kind we're talking about. And the last piece is we need to work with schools if we really want this model to expand. And we've created some partnerships, and we're creating programs for master teachers. with MIT for this summer. And the goal there is, why would you do that? And the answer is, we want to increase capacity. And what we really want to do is build a hunger on the part of schools for competency-based and digital education. What we really want to do is build a hunger for teachers who've been prepared in this fashion. The first class enters this June, next June, 17. But they're not going to be a real class. What they're going to be is a group of perhaps 25 fellows. And what we're asking them to do is, everything here is new. We're asking them, try it, see what works, see what doesn't work. Help us figure out how to do this. So when we offer the program the year after, we'll have had a run through and know how well it works. So what I ask of you today is, wish us luck, and know that we are educating a group of students that we hope will have the capacity to teach in today's schools and the skills and knowledge to move those schools into the information age. Thank you all very, very much. Can I take some questions? Please, let me ask a favor. I know a few people here, but I don't know everybody. Can you tell me your name and where you're from, what you do? Oh. Thank you. Oh. Of course I do. I can't see you, but I remember you.
So what I was going to ask is, are these teachers being prepared to teach in brick-and-mortar schools or in virtual schools or both? And if it's in brick-and-mortar schools, will they do any sort of residency period in a real classroom?
We really don't have a choice. What we really have in most of our countries are brick-and-mortar schools. And the fact of the matter is, these students are going to end up teaching in brick-and-mortar schools for the most part, almost entirely. And that's why we're trying to straddle both worlds. Prepare them to teach in those schools, but give them the skills to do the kinds of things you're talking about, to build using competencies and digital learning and blended learning and simulations and other activities that allow us to individualize education. And in terms of clinical experience, yeah, they're doing normal clinical experience so that they will have that as well. It doesn't matter what you've learned virtually if you can't apply it face to face. Please.
I'm from the United States. I'm Judith Bergman, and I work at University of Massachusetts Law School. And I was wondering who or how were the competencies defined, and how and who will be the assessors, who will be doing the assessments?
Did everybody hear the question? Okay. The question was, how were you able to give such an interesting and humorous speech? The question was, where do the competencies come from? And how will they be assessed? We began with a set of competencies developed by a woman named Charlotte Danielson, who joined our project. And Charlotte's one of the people who's well known for having developed teacher education competencies. And if you look at the kind of competencies that you see in all kinds of typologies of what teachers need to know and be able to do, they're very similar. Our job was to take those competencies and update them. What's it mean to work in the kind of environment that you're trying to create? Having done that, we then did two other things. One was MIT assembled a group to work on the disciplines and how that might be, and have them review those competencies and ground them in the disciplines. The next step was take them out to people who work in the field and say, does this really look like what you need to know in order to do your job? And between those four things, that's how we came to the competencies. We added one other piece, which is going to be very important in assessment. In all of our other projects, we've tended to use value-added assessment. And we've had a lot of trouble getting the data to make that work. With this project, we're going to try a different form of assessment. In addition to the competencies that teachers have, those competencies all produce different kinds of behaviors and learning in students. By focusing on those competencies, we're also focusing on what the students in their classrooms need to know and be able to do. And that'll be a major part of the assessment of all this. And all of this, it's what you're all finding. Everything we create right now, if it's new, is a beta. And we found with the betas we create, it takes 3 years to get them basically right. In essence, what happens is the first year is always wildly off the mark. The second year, we spend a lot of time tweaking. The third year, we finally have a program that looks reasonably like what we hoped it would look like in the first year. So we're assuming it's going to take 3 years, and we imagine those competencies will change a great deal over time. Please.
I'm interested to know from institution heads, there's this noble goal of of trying to achieve individualized instruction. And on the other hand, we also want to reach globally and scale it up and reach, a vast number of learners. There's a certain contradiction here in how we can make this happen. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on it as we're starting this new program?
That's an excellent question. There are other excellent questions. Let me respond to it. The question was, what we're talking about is an education that seeks to be global. At the same time, we're talking about individualizing that education. How do you make both things happen at once? Are they conflicting goals? I don't think they are. What we'd like to be universal are the kinds of skills and knowledge that are required. What we'd like to be universal are the capacity to reach large audiences that are global. What we'd like to be doable is for the model to be affordable. All of those things are essential if we're going to have a global marketplace for whatever it is that's created. What the model says, though, is that we all learn at different rates. And what's individualized is the process by which we achieve common outcomes. What's individualized is the instructional methods that one may use, or the learning methods one may use. And what's individualized is the amount of time it takes you to get there. Some of us master things faster than other things, and we want to tie it to that. So I hope that answers it. Please.
My name is Paul Schubrook. I'm from a girls' school, K-12 in Toronto. I was wondering what the foundation's approach would be, or what, if you're making a conscious effort to reach beyond, let's say, the U.S. in terms of getting input from the global voices. Could you speak a little bit about that? Thank you.
We're not where we want to be in all respects. Would we like global voices involved in this? Very, very much. And part of what we're trying to do is set up the initial model. Can we make it work in one country before we try to extend it? Before we ever try to do that, one of the things we'll do is ask for help in terms of what's it need to be. Models preparing teachers aren't universal, even if many of the skills are. And for that, we'll need help. We need help in context, we need help in skills, we need help in expectations, and other than that, we haven't nailed.
We'll take one more question, Arthur.
Please.
One thing is like I'm a STEM educator in education technologies from here in the Boston area. I'd like to get your comments on the role that private enterprise can play in addressing some of these problems that you are mentioning, all the way from introducing solutions to schools to scaling those solutions, both nationally and internationally.
Did everybody hear that? The question was, what role can private enterprise play in educational initiatives? And I must admit, I don't find a huge distinction between public and private educators. One of the things I think is that we can have gross errors on both sides. And the degree to which one party deserves to participate and the other not is entirely dependent upon who that partner is. One of the things we're going to need, I don't care whether the new inventions come from the private sector or the public sector, though I sure would appreciate it if they were open source, which isn't likely to occur in the private sector. We need talent. And one of the things we're starting to see in the United States is we're seeing the development of a group of educators, a group of people who care about education, who are beginning to work in the private sector because they can move more quickly than the public sector. One of the interesting phenomena, I'm in the midst of writing a book about the future of higher education. And what I basically said was, you need to look in three directions if you're going to understand the future. One is you need to take current trends, demographics, economics, technologies, and project them forward. The other thing you need to do is look backward. Many nations made a transition from an agrarian to an industrial economy. And when they did that, they began with higher education systems that were geared again to a different era. They were agrarian, they were classical. Many of them came from models that were 1,000 years old at the time they were introduced. And what we find is, oh, by the way, the third direction is looking sideways. Sideways, and the importance of that is, education isn't the fastest changing industry in the world. Others have been forced to change more quickly than education. Seeing the kinds of media in this country is an excellent example. They were forced to move faster, responding to the same forces that education is responding to. And as a result, watching it, you can see the kinds of changes that were made and are likely to follow in education. Let me go back a piece and bring it back to your question. Real change within education has occurred at the periphery. Existing institutions have tended to change, following models that are new and were created outside. They migrate into higher education. Those models can be created by not-for-profits. Those models can be created by for-profits. But we need the models to guide the future. The stage that occurs in education, we go through a normal process, at least in this country. And that process is faced with dramatic change in society. Higher education, K-12 education, deny the need to change and cling to the existing model. We see broad-scale experimentation, lots of different models, tried all over the place, little experiments at existing institutions. And that tends to be followed by the creation of larger scale models. In this country, we saw the introduction of places like Johns Hopkins and Cornell and MIT, which represented radically different views of education. And they came to dominate the landscape. And then what we see is, in that helter-skelter of different reforms, what we see is an effort to standardize. Let's make this the same throughout. And then finally what we see is integration and the creation of a new system. And what I'd argue today is we're at the stage of denying the need for change, powerful debate, experimentation, and the beginning of the creation of new models. I think it's going to be an exciting period ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Levine, Arthur. And those questions too, I was thinking, we are actually very excited in partnering with the Woodrow Wilson Foundation on this journey. And the question about, in some sense, MIT is doing what we do like to do, which is undertake large experiments, be an incubator for change. And a large part of this initiative is about that. I was struck, when the question of competencies came up, one of the things that we hope to do is bring contemporary influences into the competencies, about learning sciences, data sciences, in how we rethink some of these competencies. I was also struck by the question about individualized instruction, and it made me think about, with the 20 years that I've been here at MIT, the various educational technology initiatives that have touched, that we have launched. And all of them, I could paint a line where they are directed towards saying, how can we sort of balance the efficacy of things that we believe in, hands-on, first-hand experiences, small group learning, with the efficiencies that we need to have in order to serve large numbers of students. And I guess this is part of the continuing challenge, and especially when you think about the next generation of teachers and learners, which brings me to my friend, colleague over here, who actually leads the project that Arthur was talking about, Professor Eric Klopfer. I promised I'd refrain from making long introductions, just say he's an all-around great guy. He's a fun guy. But many of you know Eric as the games guy, and when he's not teaching games, he's playing them. And first-hand experience matters. So Eric Klopfer, Professor Klopfer's research focuses on the development and use of computer games and simulations for building understanding of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Games that he works on are designed to build understanding of scientific practices, concepts, as well as critical knowledge. He uses both mobile and web-delivered game platforms. They're in the realm of simulations, and there his work focuses on students understanding complex systems, something you hear a lot about at MIT. And what he does is connect computer programming with scientific practice, critical thinking, and real-world issues. He is a co-author of the books Adventures in Modeling and The More We Know, as well as the author of Augmented Learning. Eric is also the co-founder and past president of the nonprofit Learning Games Network. My friend, my colleague, to talk about the next generation of learners, Eric Klopfer.
Thanks, Vijay. And it's a little challenging following Arthur because I kind of rely on being the funny guy, and he sort of has taken that steam out of my talk. But I am fortunate actually to be able to build on some of the things that he talked about. Arthur talked about games and simulations and the ways that those are an important part of what we're doing in at least at MIT, and sort of helping out the Woodrow Wilson Academy for Teaching and Learning. And I see that sort of happening in two different ways. One is games actually in teacher education, and we're working on several different projects to think about, okay, when pre-service teachers are met with one of these challenges and they find that they don't have the skills to meet that challenge, what are different kinds of ways that we can help them learn to meet that challenge? And one of those ways is their field practice, which is an important component of, as Arthur was discussing, of what they do. And another is sort of like being able to learn in simulated environments. And what games do, as I'll talk about, is structure that learning in a particular way to give important feedback to the people who are learning in those environments. So that's one of the things we're doing. That's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today is another aspect of games, which is in student learning, and teachers play a very important part of that as well. And so another thing that we think about in the academy is how do we actually create teachers that are able to use these new kinds of tools and new kinds of practices in their own classrooms, and that's more of what I'll talk about today. Is this working? Oh, there we go. Part of what I do here is I run the Scheller Teacher Education Program, which is a program that helps prepare MIT undergrads who want to be math and science teachers. So we don't have a major here in teaching. We don't even have a minor here in teaching. These are students who are math majors, who are chemical engineers, who are computer scientists, who have an interest in education, who think that they might want to be teachers. And they find our program, and they can learn through our program. And the point of these pictures here is that we try to practice what we preach. So I don't, unlike today, I don't stand up in front of the room and talk to them about how they should sort of have hands-on learning in their own classes, but we learn in a hands-on way within our own class. The other part of what we do, and that's most of what I'll talk about today, is a group we call the Education Arcade. And the Education Arcade is a place where we design, develop, test, try to disseminate different kinds of games, simulations, and other kinds of educational technologies. Some of what you see on the screen are some of the mobile games. I'll talk a little about those, more mobile games, online games, alternate reality games, and more recently what we've done is a series of edX courses to help other people learn about and use and develop educational technologies and games. And some of those are running right now. So just a quick overview of what I'll do today. I'll talk about the evolution of digital learning as I see it. I'll talk about why creative play and invention are an important part of that. I'll sort of dispel some rumors about learning and games. I'll talk about a few different examples from our own work in terms of the ways that we see games playing important roles in learning. And I'll close a little bit with how to make games and simulations and how we think that's an important part of student practice as well. So as we look at evolution in schools, and this is the kind of evolution I mean in terms of devices, we sort of see, there was an excitement when sort of personal computers started getting affordable enough and powerful enough in classrooms, and some of the early iMacs were one of the big successes in schools, and schools rushed out to get those. And then we had laptops, and schools rushed out to get those, and then we had netbooks, and schools rushed out to get those, and now we have iPads, and schools are rushing out to get those. And we think about these different kinds of devices, and along with those devices have come some sort of design trade-offs in the way that we think about what people do on those things. So in parallel to that, we see maybe the evolution of learning. This is the Logo programming language, a little hard to see up here, but the Logo programming language, this is from an Apple II, so maybe not the very first version of Logo, but an early version of Logo. Designed and developed here at MIT by Seymour Papert and others, really a way to sort of get kids to express their mathematical ideas, to sort of develop sort of constructionist learning where they're learning about things by making things. A really sort of powerful way of learning, and have changed the practices and pedagogies for many people around the world, both practicing teachers and academics like myself. And I see that as both. This is some of the way I learned when I was a child as well. As we see that kind of technology has progressed, and we see sort of geometry maybe has moved from something more like this to something more like this, which is a Khan Academy video. So instead of sort of having this constructionist form of learning where students are expressing their ideas and exploring things and working together, they're watching videos and answering multiple choice questions. And I think a lot of us sort of question whether this is the right direction for the evolution of learning or not. And what's happened is that they're using these on these media consumption devices, whether it's Chromebooks, which tend to be sort of more used for media consumption, or tablets, which have been sort of geared for media consumption. Not that we can't do things that are more creative on them, but the way that we sort of think about the design of these has been as devices that consume media. And what we've done is create media consumers. And these are my own kids consuming media. A couple years ago, they don't look a lot, the media maybe looks a little, the kids are a little bit bigger, but the media is pretty much the same as they consume today. But they're invested in this, they really like this media, but in a lot of ways they're happy to sort of consume it all day long and not produce much of it at all. But if we think about the kinds of skills we're trying to foster in today's students, Arthur talked about the way that education hasn't really changed very much, and we're not thinking about what are the tools that we need today to help people thrive in society. These are the kinds of things that we need to teach them: ways of thinking, ways of working, tools for working, skills for living in the world like citizenship and communication, creative and critical thinking. These are the kinds of skills they really need to succeed. If we really just teach them how to solve math problems, that is an important thing that they need to do, but that's not going to get them very far in this world today. So what we need to do is turn passive media consumers. This is some of a lot of kids like today, they like to go onto YouTube and watch videos about other people playing games. And I still don't quite understand, even though I'm someone who studies games, I don't understand why my kids enjoy this so much, and other people around the world do as well. This is one very popular blog with millions of subscribers who watch people play Minecraft. But we want to do is sort of turn those media consumers into active digital participants. So this is my own son, has now created a page, which I think has about 3 subscribers, one of which is me, one of which is his sister, I think one of which is another account that he has that he subscribes to his own. And he produces videos and curates videos as well. So it's about sort of seeing these models and then figuring out ways that we take these students who are seeing these models of other producers and turn them into producers as well, even if they only have 3 subscribers in their community. And this is another way. So this is sort of life reflecting life. So this is my son. This is him in Minecraft, and he has a costume on his character here, which was actually the Halloween costume that he made of himself as a person in Minecraft. So it's sort of the costume in the world reflecting the costume in the Minecraft, which then is reflected in Minecraft again. So as we think about creative thinking, should we simply just do this? Should we take logo and sort of just put it on a phone again? Will this be the solution to our problems? If we sort of just go back to where we were before and figure out a way to make it work on today's devices? And I think the answer to that is clearly no. Really, we have really great and wonderful things we can do, and I'm going to keep coming back to Minecraft in this example here. But Minecraft is an environment that has the potential to really be filled with great creative thinking. It's about building, it's about working with other people, it's about creating servers where you have to collaborate and come up with rules for your society about what's proper etiquette within that space and how do you respect other people's boundaries and work that they've done in that world. So there's really a lot of great and powerful things that you can do in that world as well. You can do simple programming within that space. It's a really great space to be doing things. We don't necessarily need to be thinking about simply just the ways that we can replicate the practices of before. Lots of other kinds of games that are available to do this kind of thing. Some of them are explicitly educational, like this one, or not explicitly educational, like World of Warcraft, or things sort of in between here, like Bad Piggies, where you were constructing. It was probably, I think, the best Rovio game that they ever made, better than any of the Angry Birds games, where you're actually constructing machines to sort of accomplish different kinds of tasks. And we also can think about creative invention, so we can be inspired by those games and want to make those games ourselves. This is Game Blocks, a project developed in my lab by student Paul Medlock-Walton, who's now on staff and has created this environment for other kids creating games themselves and be able to share those online. You'll see it looks a bit like Scratch, only specifically tailored for making games. So when I mention the word games, people often think of one particular kind of vision of that. They think of 3D first-person shooters. They think of boys in basements on consoles, eating Doritos, drinking Mountain Dew, and not being particularly socially skilled. And this is what they do. This is what games are. And when we think about learning games, we say, well, how are we going to make this game into something where students can actually learn? Well, we're going to simply ask a question that you need to answer in order to be able to kill the things in the world. So how many volts do I need for my laser to kill 3 times 6 opponents? So this is not what we mean by games, and it's certainly not what we mean by educational games. There's lots of other kinds of games that people are involved in that are much deeper kinds of learning experiences that are not sort of so gender specific. And certainly we don't think of educational games as simply grafting educational content onto that space. But this idea really comes from what I call the legacy of Math Blaster. Math Blaster is probably the most successful in terms of commercial sales educational game. It was gone through many, many iterations over time. In Math Blaster, you have math problems, and they're floating in the sky, and then you have to shoot the right thing that matches the other math problem that's floating in the sky. And there's nothing to do, the math problems have nothing to do with what's going on in the world. Those could be vocabulary words, those could be chemistry problems. But the reward, simply the play that you get in this space is the reward for learning. So you learn something and you get to shoot it out of the sky, and people are happy about that thing. So this is what's been referred to. This is not my phrase originally, but it's been referred to as chocolate-covered broccoli. So the broccoli is the thing that you want kids to do. It's the thing that's good for them. And the chocolate is the thing that they like, so that's the shooting things out of the sky. And so you put those together and you make chocolate-covered broccoli, and you figure that that's the thing that's going to solve all your problems because it will get kids to eat their broccoli. It'll get kids to do the math problems. And it does to some extent. It gets kids to do math problems. It gets kids to sort of say, hey, that was fun for a second. But it doesn't promote healthy eating or learning. So we know that this is sort of just behaviorist conditioning. We know that if we give people rewards for a while, we'll get them to do the thing, but we're not going to give them chocolate for the rest of their lives. Not every time they see a math problem, there's going to be something to shoot out of the sky. We really need to give them a deep appreciation for what math is and help them appreciate math for itself. Because we know when the chocolate goes away, when the reward goes away, that the behavior will be extinguished. So that might get them to do a few math problems, but it's certainly not going to get them to do math problems in the long run. And in fact, in many ways, it can be counterproductive because it's going to make them hate math. It's going to make them think that math is something that I should only do if you give me a reward for doing it at the end. So instead, learning should really be playful. It should be about thinking about we have people that come to us and they say, how can I make this topic fun? We wanted photosynthesis we wanted to teach kids. How can we make photosynthesis fun? And our response is, and this comes from my colleague Scott Osterweil, who developed the game I'll show in a second. It's not about making it fun. It's about finding what's fun in that topic and then figuring out how to make that apparent and available to all the people who are doing this. So what we do is we go to people who find photosynthesis fun. We go to scientists, we go to students who say, this is what I think is really interesting and exciting about this topic. And we figure out a way to amplify that and to be able to show that through games. So I sort of say in this new age of genetic engineering, we should be able to sort of think about ways that we can sort of be able to sort of get deeply into the root of what makes those things interesting and powerful, and be able to embed that in the practices that we do in education as well. And I think this game, The Logical Journey of the Zambinis, which Scott has one of the creators of, really exemplifies that. It's a game that was out in the 90s, which has just been re-released, I think, last summer on iPad and other platforms. But it's a game about mathematics, but you'll never see a math problem in this game. And the math problems are embedded in the world. You need to solve those math problems, but you don't see them floating in the sky in a disembodied way. You're solving sort of embedded math problems within this space. And that's what we think that learning games should be like. We also know that science is really about play. I won't read this whole quote, but if you walk into any of the labs on campus here, which I don't suggest you do on all the labs on campus here, but there might be some you can walk by and see people working in. You'll see that scientists are being playful. It's not about them sort of necessarily all the time having a hypothesis and doing their experiment and looking at the results and analyzing them. But instead, it's a lot of times them playing with ideas, playing with materials, sort of coming up with those ideas for that next experiment. That's what science is about, and science is really about play. And we should be able to sort of teach that to kids. And so people often think that this is what the joy of gaming is, that joy of gaming comes from sort of that thrill of victory, that I'm having fun all the time. But the joy of gaming is really about what we call hard fun. This is a term that was coined by Seymour Papert of Logo fame, who I mentioned earlier. And these are images of actual faces of gamers here that somebody did about people playing games. And these are not sort of people throwing their hands in the air having fun. These are people wrestling with challenging problems. And that's what hard fun is. Hard fun is about sort of having some challenge that you see in front of you, figuring out a way that you initially don't overcome that challenge. You realize you need to overcome that challenge. You eventually gain the skills, gain the knowledge to do that, and that's where the fun comes from. The fun comes from overcoming that obstacle that was placed in your way. This is my daughter at PAX East about a year ago. It's a big gaming conference here in Boston, and these are mostly men that are literally twice her height. She has no idea that they're around her. She is focused on this game and overcoming that obstacle. And in the end, she will say she had fun because she was able to overcome that obstacle, and that's what it's about. I won't go into too many details on this, but we sort of think about ways that we can actually structure that so we can actually have obstacles that are put in people's way that makes it for an interesting space for people to learn in. And that comes from things like interesting decisions, which is Sid Meier from Civilization came up with this idea. Consequences to those decisions. We have to have some sort of positive or negative things. Clearly defined goals, and that's plural because we like to sort of think about, we talked about personalized learning and individualized learning. Some of that comes in games from the fact that you can actually make different choices and you can have different sort of goals. One person's goal might be to reach the highest number of points in a particular time. Another person might have a goal of sort of collecting a certain number of things. And that comes from some feedback that people have in that world. So there's some sort of quantifiable outcome. You might have goals, you might have wealth, you might have health, you might have a number of connections within that world. There's different ways that people can collect things and value those different things. And finally, there's some sort of underlying model or system that makes it coherent. I won't go into too many details here, but different sort of things that we sort of exhibit in the world and different kinds of games exhibit different kinds of these characteristics. And they need not be digital games for that matter. I put Risk up here. There's lots of analog board games that also exhibit these same qualities. So let me give a couple of examples and think about ways that we actually use games as particular things. So this is a project that we did several years ago called the Ubic games, or ubiquitous games. These were games that were designed for the mobile web that were played on smartphones that were connected to high school biology classes, so specifically around genetics, ecology, DNA and RNA, evolution. And the idea was that you didn't play these games in class, but you played these games between class, before school, after school. You played them for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, like we do a lot of casual games like these, where you don't sit down and you necessarily play this game for an hour at a time, but you sit down and you play this game for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, but you might come back to it again and again and again. This is my new favorite one, and I do sometimes sit down at this one a little bit too long, Clash Royale, but the same idea that you sort of can come back to these games again and again and play them over time, but each time you sit down for about a few minutes. These are some of the games that we had, and we gave these to teachers. We gave them professional development, taught them how to sort of use these in class. And the idea was that you sort of give these games up front as an experience, and then the teachers had sort of a bridging curriculum that bridged the experience from the game into the topic within their classroom. So rather than sort of like giving an abstract example of DNA the first time, or rather than giving an abstract example of what genetics were from Mendel's garden, you sort of give people an experience first. In this case, they were breeding beetles to sort of run a pet store. You come into the class with that experience, and the teacher now has a concrete experience to sort of relate everything to. This is some research, and I won't go into a lot of details here, but I will just say that we had 4 different games. We had 4 different results, and so one of the things we learned from this is that the kind of game, what they did in the game, how the game was designed, plays a huge role in whether they learned anything or not relative to control groups. And I say challenge over practice here. So it's games where we sort of had them increase in difficulty over time, where the challenge became more attuned to their own ability. Those are the games where they learned the most and showed the most change. Games that were simply practice, where they were repeating things again and again, didn't seem to lead to much change at all. As I mentioned, the game itself was sort of this leading experience. And as we think about the design of games, we draw upon this thing that's called the action reflection cycle. It's well known from sort of experiential learning, where you might learn outside on a ropes course or something like that. And you have some challenge as a group, and then afterwards you sort of overcome that challenge and you sort of debrief about that. We think about games in very much the same way, where games are that experience, but you don't necessarily learn anything just by doing the game. You do something by doing the game and then having reflection about what you did in that experience. And that reflection sometimes comes from the individual. Sometimes people are reflective and can think about that. And many times that needs to be facilitated. Teachers need to do this. Mentors, peers need to think about how they facilitate that reflection. And they combine that then with other resources. And those resources can be a lab, it can be a lecture, it can be a reading. There's lots of other ways you think about combining other materials with the games. We don't expect the game to be the whole learning experience, but it's often a launching point that then sort of takes them into this virtuous cycle. Games can also build identity. This was a game, I mentioned Scott Osterwile. He was the lead on this project called Vanished. It was a curated game or a form of an alternate reality game that we did with the Smithsonian Institute. The idea here is it was a game that pretended not to be a game. It started with this video some MIT students helped make, where we said, we're really sorry, we were supposed to launch this great game today, but our website was hacked, and if you have any information about it, we've set up a forum. Please post anything you might notice in that forum. And up at the top of the video, it's not shown here, but there was, for about a second, there was a little code that was shown at the top of the screen there. And it turned out that there were 100 different codes. Each person only got one of them. And people started to realize them and say, hey, I saw this code in my video. Did you see this same code? And people would say, no, I saw a different code. And they'd realize that the codes had some overlap in them. They had to string them all together. And then it turned out that was a cryptogram. They had to decrypt that cryptogram. And so they worked as a community of about 6,000 players to actually put these pieces together and understand that. And then over the next 6 or 8 weeks, they got sort of similar sorts of clues. It was from this Earth-like beings who in the future had discovered an Earth-like planet devoid of life. And they were looking for help to figure out what had gone wrong on this planet. And they wanted to use our planet as a sort of a base case for understanding this other planet. So they would ask for data about different kind of temperatures across latitude and longitude. They would ask for information about flora and fauna. But of course, if you wanted to give them temperature data, these future beings knew nothing about Celsius or Fahrenheit. So you need to say, how are we going to establish measures with this future beings? We need to think about how we communicate measures. So it's all these sort of great problems that students solved in a group of about, as I said, about 6,000 students over the course of that time. The last game I'll talk about is Radix, which is a game for exploring systems. So this was a game that we developed and launched about a year and a half ago now. from the Gates Foundation, developed in conjunction with Filament Games. And it's a massively multiplayer online game, so it's a game that lots of people play together online. The idea in this is that it's based around these quests. So you have these characters here, and you come up to them, and they give you something to do within this world. The premise for this world is that it's an Earth-like planet, at a Renaissance era-like in technology, and you're part of this underground society that's using math and science to make the world a better place. And so part of what you do is you get these quests, and they're either in a biology, there's a sort of a series of biology ones, and there's a series of mathematics ones. The biology ones might be see if you can breed plants that have a particular quality that's going to be used as medicine, or you need to sort of use maps and geometry and geography to sort of map out a particular area, or use geometry to rebuild parts of buildings that have fallen down. So you have to use sort of mathematics and biology within this world. As part of that, you sort of have all these systems that underlie it. So there's these mathematical systems here. There's biological systems like genetics, and you have a series of tools you can use to solve those problems. And over time, you get increasingly more difficult challenges. But at the same time, what we're doing is collecting data on what students are doing within that world. And we're able to sort of help analyze whether students are understanding something or not simply by the answer that they get, but the process that they use to get that answer. So it's not just about the answer that you get from the genetics experiment, it's about the process that you used in the genetics experiment, and we can help convey to the teacher then that the student is either understanding or not understanding particular things within that world. This data is a little bit dated here, but we've had about 20,000 players from all around the world playing this game. Teachers can create classes, teachers can get feedback and data from their students, and individuals can come in on their own as well. And it's online now. So the last part here, I'll just talk about creating games very briefly. So we think that sort of playing games is one entree into sort of making games as a way of becoming a creative producer as well. This is Game Blocks. At MIT here, we have a number of different kinds of programming environments that people have created to help get kids interested in programming and creating and sharing with each other. Scratch is certainly the biggest and most famous of those by my colleague Mitch Resnick, which is a really great environment. We have Game Blocks. We have App Inventor from my colleague Hal Abelson, which is about creating apps on Android devices. So we have a really sort of deep mission here at MIT to sort of get different kinds of people interested in creating their own things on computational devices through different kinds of entry points into programming. So this one's about games. This is Mitch Resnick and his colleagues sort of have this great sort of cycle that they think about where it's about imagine, create, play, share, reflect, and then imagine again. It's another virtuous cycle that sort of helps get kids thinking about how they use computing creatively in their own lives, whether that's in school or out of school. We think about Game Blocks as a sort of another space to explore within that, using some of these graphical programming languages, and also being able to share your creations with other people within that space. Star Logo is another one that we've done. This one is more specifically designed for schools. So this is a platform for kids creating their own games and simulations, but specifically based on complex systems. And we've created a whole curriculum around this using biology. I see Brian is here. He's just in his own classes at the university as well. And I'll close with clicks. So I don't know if you've talked about clicks, but or will. This is just one slide about it. But this is a partnership between several people in the room here that I see around the room, including Vijay and others. It's a partnership between the Tata Institute for Social Sciences and MIT to help sort of introduce educational technologies through professional development and capacity building in India in English, math, science, and values. And it's a project that's aiming to get out to 1,000 schools, 2,700 teachers in the next year. So it's a big, daunting initiative that we're really fortunate to have great partners both here and in India. And you may hear about that more later. So with that, I will say that this is the edX course that's running right now. You can find them online, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm going to ask you to wait for the mic. Maybe I should practice that. Yeah, please ask for the mic when you have questions. Eric, I just noticed Klopfer.
Did I misspell my own name?
Clawfur. I thought you had named one of your things.
Yeah, it was my colleagues who used my name.
Questions for Eric?
Take Yes, I'm just going to get the mic because it allows everyone to hear, and as well as we're video recording.
1, 2, 3. Hello, Anna and Mikhail Bukhtayarov, Siberian Federal University, Russia. So the question is, you had very good, I don't know, picture of how game works, some ideas on the game, but well, for example, in our country, there's a problem when the games are considered to be something not serious. So this is something that that cannot be used for education beyond primary school. Seriously. So we have really strong resistance of teachers, especially at the university level, that this is something that is, this is not serious, that cannot work. How do you fight it? Do you have this problem, and how would you recommend to overcome this barrier?
So that's a good question. And I think in the United States, there's been a shift. So I've been doing this now with games specifically for about 15 years now. And when we started doing this in classrooms, we'd come to a school and we'd often have an individual teacher who would say, this is a really great idea. I love the idea of games, but can we call it something different? Can we call it like a simulated digital experience? Or can we call it, and I was like, I don't care what you call it. You can call it anything you want. It's the design that matters to me. And that's what's going to sort of make a difference. And in fact, in many cases, we did. When the permission slips went home, it said, so we're going to be doing this thing. We're going to be collecting some data from it. It was called a simulation. It was called a digital experience. It was called an online interactive environment, whatever you want to call it. And that was a more sort of acceptable thing to call it in those times. I think at this point in the United States, there's been a bit of a shift in the thinking around that, and this idea of serious games, that phrase has caught on quite a bit. People are seeing games sort of being moved at least up into the middle school level, and sometimes now even to high school as well. And understanding that I think some of that is also coming from an understanding that lots of different kinds of people are playing games. So adults are playing games, teenagers are playing games, and we start to see that, well, games aren't exactly what I thought they were. They're not that sort of just going to shoot things on the screen. So people are developing a more general games literacy, as well as developing a literacy around what educational games can be. So the tides are turning here. I'd say that it's taken 15 years. But in many cases, even at that initial times, just thinking about ways to recharacterize it was a way of getting it in the door.
Just a little comment. Well, I think you should think about the games that would teach teachers how to use the games.
Yes. Yes, and in fact, in many cases we have teachers. It's a really good question around professional development. In many cases we have teachers who say, like, yes, I'm happy to use this. Just give me the instructions. I'm going to give it to my class, and they're going to play the game. And no, you need to play the game first. And that's really important for them to be able to do that. And that goes with a game. It goes with any kind of learning experience that we design. The teachers need to do it first. They need to understand what it's going to be like to be a student in that. They need to understand what it's like to struggle, and that's okay. But it's really important for them to be able to do that as well. It's a good point.
Fiona Hollins from Teachers College. I was going to ask if you did any subgroup analysis of the users and their experience. For example, did it make a difference as to whether there were girls, boys, ethnicity, reading, math ability? And also for the game where the game vanished, did you actually look at who participated among the 6,000?
Yeah, so we always do we always do gender analysis. We always do some sort of analysis that has to do with what their beginning skills were. In general, I mean, we've done lots of studies. In general, we see very little differences between gender, both in terms of how much they play, how they rate the game in terms of whether they liked it or not, how much they learn. And in fact, I think in many cases, if we look at the kind of games that girls and boys play, they do play different kinds of games. But most of them do play games, at least in the United States. In fact, in a lot of ways, the fact that these games are sort of coming through school and sort of making everybody play them sort of breaks down a lot of those barriers. And we have cases where we've designed games that are really we designed one that was about nurturing birds and sort of having this family of birds that you'd sort of have to study evolution on. And everybody's like, oh, girls are going to like that and boys are going to hate that. And we had boys, high school boys, crying when their birds had died on their island. We had another game that was about battle. It was a sort of a Pokemon-style card battle game. And we said, oh, only boys are going to play that. Boys are only going to like that. And of course, we had girls sort of playing it just as much as the boys. So in fact, I think I see another one of the roles of what we're doing here is sort of helping to break down some of those gender barriers that exist in the gaming space. There was just an article about MMOs and gender over the weekend that I saw. And we do other breakdowns as well. I think there's other ways to slice the data that might lead to, we don't look at like reading abilities. That would be an interesting thing to look at within that space.
Thank you. One last question, and not to put pressure, but between this and the break.
My question is how to make the teaching and the learning of classics playful. For example, the Republic of Plato or the Declaration of Independence for the adults. How to make such a learning playful?
That's a good question, and actually, there's a group I'm working with at Harvard that's doing a game, trying to do a game about the Declaration of Independence right now, and they've developed a series of ideas about. It's about in these cases, and when you're thinking about things like history, it's not about sort of just studying what happened, but about thinking about yourself as an active participant in that place, about exploring what could happen. So in the case of Declaration of Independence, it might not be about just remember those different things, but it's about exploring like what happens if some of those items are there, some of those items are not there. How would the sort of the country look different in those cases? So it's about exploring a lot of what-if scenarios. There was a company up on the North Shore, Muzzy Lane, who I think still makes a game called Making History, even though they do a lot of other games now as well. And what you did is you sort of explored history in sort of short time chunks so that you could actually make decisions in history which would go off in different directions than it actually did. But history is about a series of decisions that were made, and you might have to understand what might happen under a different set of constraints. In terms of things like the classics, in my own class, we just had a group of students design a game about Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology. Again, it's about sort of thinking about ways that you can embody that experience, become a character in one of those stories, and have a chance to make choices that might be similar to the choices that somebody made, and maybe sort of obey the sort of same set of rules within that space, but you ultimately might make a different set of choices than the character in that book or story might have made. So it's about sort of making those places come alive and allowing you to sort of explore that space, and then you can sort of have a chance to reflect on that. Well, here's the way it played out in the classic tale. And so I think that's a nice way to think about those spaces as living spaces and not just sort of set in stone.
So I guess it's the design principles that are paramount. Yeah. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to take a moment to thank Arthur and Eric, our morning's keynote, our morning's speakers, and of course Dick for getting us launched. So let's give them a big hand. And